It is the final regular season mailbag of the year for Peacock and Williamson. Kyren Williams, CeeDee Lamb not getting enough love for the season they've had. Surprise coach firings. And what about some surprise playoff teams, good and bad? All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. That's where most of the mailbag questions came from this week. As usual, hit us up there on Twitter any old time you want. And of course, we got to thank everybody out there for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Love all the everydayers. Subscribe on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcast. Before we dive into these questions, today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Okay, I'm going to start with this question about CeeDee Lamb versus Tyreek Hill. And this question is from Sir Madramissimo. And he says, CeeDee Lamb is having a season that's very close to Tyreek Hill. Second in yards, first in receptions, third in touchdowns, yet no one mentions him at all in this role next to Tyreek Hill. Tua is great because of Hill. Dak is carrying the Cowboys offense, double standard. So we got a double question here. We've got the Tyreek Hill versus CeeDee Lamb, and then we got the Tua versus Dak conversation. So is Dak getting too much credit for CeeDee Lamb, and is Tua not getting enough credit for Tyreek Hill? I think is how this question goes, Matt.
It's a great question, and I'll take the easy way out right off the bat. Be like, oh, it's a team game. They all play off each other, yada, yada, yada. And I do think Miami schemes up Tyreek better than Dallas schemes up CD. But with McCarthy in charge, they scheme up CD better than they ever have. I mean, so they're high on that list in terms of getting their best player of the football in advantageous situations. Now, I think most of us think Dak's a better quarterback than Tua in a vacuum, so that influences this a little bit. And he's, a little more pelts on the wall, so to speak. And I think we'll all agree that Tyreek is scarier. He's the scariest in terms of the way he moves and threatens the defense at all levels. But that's selling CD a little short. He just set the Cowboys season record, just toppled the Michael Irvin, and he's one of the best players in the league. So this is a valid conversation. If you were doing offensive player of the year, I think Tyreek and McCaffrey are ahead of him, and then it gets pretty hard to find anyone else.
When you watch the games and you watch these guys play, it would be hard pressed to find someone who'd say, "Oh man, I think I'd rather have CD than Tyreek Hill." So
exactly.
I have to start there. Tyreek Hill is unbelievable. They both move guys around in the slot, some motion. So CeeDee Lamb has helped as well with what where he schemed up and how he gets open. But the level of fear that a DB has covering CeeDee Lamb versus covering Tyreek Hill is just different. So I think that's why the conversation is different, and it should be different. I think the Tua and Dak conversation, but yeah, and like you said, all props to what CeeDee Lamb did this year. Amazing, phenomenal, amazing season. Yeah. When you look at Dak and Tua, I think that's fair. I think Tua doesn't get credit for how he's facilitating the offense. And I've gone through this, and I host the Locked On 49ers podcast for those of you who don't know. And the Brock Purdy conversation has been, this way. It's like Christian McCaffrey. Oh, he's amazing. He's the MVP. Kyle Shanahan is helping out Brock Purdy. And it's like, well, have you never seen the last 30 years going back to Shanahan running games, going back to his dad, going back to Olandis Gary? You know what I mean? And Mostert and Matt Breida and Alfred Morris. It's like, is he not helping Christian McCaffrey either? Like the Shanahan running game has always been the thing that's been amazing, So it's like, oh, he's not helping McCaffrey, but he's helping Purdy. Look, great players are always going to have help. Good receivers usually have good quarterbacks. Good coaches usually have good quarterbacks. Good quarterbacks usually have good coaches. So at some point, you're going to find help with players who are doing amazing things in the league. And I think we're seeing this. And I love seeing how McDaniel and Tua and Tyreek Hill all work together and they all help each other out. And so I think we get too wrapped up in credit and we get too wrapped up in keeping score of who's saying what about who. And I think when you really watch the games and you really you take it all into consideration, I think Dak and Tua are pretty close and they're both doing really well with their offenses and they're both good quarterbacks in the NFL. And I wouldn't fight you if you said you liked one guy over the other with those two. And I think Tyreek Hill is just scarier and a different dude compared to CeeDee Lamb. But CeeDee Lamb's had an amazing season. That's I just think that's the level-headed way to look at things. And I would if my advice to fans and my son, I don't know if he's going to become a 49ers fan. We live in the San Francisco area. He probably will. His dad does a podcast every day about the 49ers. I don't know what team he's going to like, but one thing I'm going to advise my son is just.
What if it's Seattle? Are you going to lose your mind? If
Seattle's
I had a Ravens fan living here, we'd have a hard time.
Seattle's a great city. I liked it a lot better when the Seahawks were in the AFC West.
There you go.
You can go back to the AFC West and those old uniforms, the Steve Largent uniforms. I was like, yeah, I like the early '90s Seahawks, right? But I think their new uniforms are an abomination too. So they're just an ugly team to watch. But getting back to the topic at hand, I would advise my son, don't get wrapped up in that BS. Follow the sport, analyze the sport, because some of the stuff that fans pay attention to, especially as far as the national media goes, and Matt, we're part of the national media here, and doing a national show daily. It can get really weird, that conversation, and it's maddening. It'll make you crazy. So that's what my advice would be to Sir Madramissimo, is stop keeping score with what people are saying about you guys.
But I'm glad that he's threw CeeDee Lamb out there because he deserves more credit than he's probably gotten. He's had a tremendous year. Two things I just wanted to add to that. I love that you brought up the Mike Shanahan, Daddy Shanahan running backs, because it didn't matter which one it was, you wanted that guy on your fantasy team. But it was better when it was Portis or Terrell Davis.
It's a little bit better. And so having a better player helps, but it's not like they were having trouble running the football. It's not like teams are like, oh, this year we have to stop the run against the 49ers. It's like, that's what every pregame conversation is since Kyle Shanahan took over the 49ers. Well, you got to stop the run first, the Shanahan running game. So it really a similar topic. We had a question about Kyren Williams and maybe a lack of appreciation for Kyren Williams. So CeeDee Lamb, a little appreciation there for the season he's had, maybe not getting talked about enough, and Kyren Williams as well, Matt. And the question
Let
here,
me get to him in 1 second. I got one more receiver thing I'm going to throw out there, because I think Tyreek's ahead of him. I think Justin Jefferson, despite his injuries, is clearly ahead of him. And then we can have conversations, Jamar Chase, guys like that. But CeeDee's in the conversation for me. It's third best receiver on the planet right now. But I just want to recognize what Tyreek is doing this last 2, 3, 5 years. I think he's in the stratosphere of Rice, Moss, Tyreek. I mean, like that kind of stratosphere.
Well, let's put it this way. Tyreek is having more success without Patrick Mahomes than Patrick Mahomes is having without Tyreek. Like, as far as statistically, now the Chiefs are still good, and Patrick Mahomes went and won a Super Bowl without Tyreek. But you look at what's happening this year. Tyreek is in the conversation for MVP, might win Offensive Player of the Year. Patrick Mahomes is struggling to find a consistent receiver to catch passes from him. So he's a difference-making player,
without question. Some of that's the Brady Belichick conversation, though. Like, they both helped each other a little bit, They
helped each other, and then all of a sudden they parted. One guy had more success than the other. Both guys have had success in this conversation, but it wasn't a situation where a lot of people thought, the hot take immediately was, oh, well, Tyreek, there goes his career because he doesn't have Patrick Mahomes anymore. That is not the case.
Not the case. He's an all-time great.
But he did go to another good quarterback, accurate. Tyreek Hill has talked about the accuracy from Tua and how good Tua is. He's a dart thrower for sure. He's a different style of quarterback than Mahomes, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, but he's a good quarterback, and you can play good quarterback in different ways, and he's perfect fit for that system. And Tyreek Hill loves playing with Tua. And when you when you look at what these players have done and what they can do, and clearly it didn't hurt Tyreek to change teams, but it does help that he's still with a good coach and good quarterback.
No doubt. He didn't go to Carolina or, some
He would go to some like
or,
Browns Jets purgatory where they still can't figure things out, with certain positions. And that's actually a conversation I want to talk about as well, with like how teams find their quarterbacks and how chaotic the NFL can be. Kyren Williams, does he deserve some more appreciation as well? Tons more.
Let's chat about him.
The Peacock and Williamson mailbag next. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. When you download the Gametime app, get a little extra $20 off using our promo code. With Gametime, the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. You want to go to a ball game, and maybe it's killer last-minute deals at Gametime. All-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee. Gametime takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets. All you got to do is download the Gametime app and see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. I love the all-in pricing because the hidden fees are the worst part about buying tickets for any big event. All-in prices show your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal before you check out. Gametime has deals right up to the start of the event, even an hour after the event start. It's the place to find last-minute seats. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, one word, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Isn't it fascinating how the Cleveland Browns trade multiple first-round picks? It's ridiculous, all-guaranteed contract because they're so hard up to find a franchise quarterback. And Joe Flacco is sleeping on his couch, right? I mean, he's working out, but he's not working out with the team. He's working out by himself in the gym and sleeping on the couch. And I'm sure some football fans were working out just as hard as Joe Flacco was in August and September. And he's the guy that's leading them to the playoffs, playing the best quarterback that we've seen from the Browns since they made that deal. The 49ers trade multiple picks to go up and get a quarterback, number 3 overall, and it ends up being the very last pick in the following draft. It ends up being the guy for them, and it's leading them into the playoffs, and it's having a phenomenal season. And it's just the chaoticness of the NFL is fascinating, and that's just one of the things that hit me this week while we're talking about where players are coming from and who gets credit. And sometimes it's hard to give the guy credit because of where he came from. And I've dealt with that a lot, with the conversation around Brock Purdy. Does he belong in the category of MVP? Like, you give McCaffrey all the credit, you give Brock Purdy none of the credit, right? You give Tyreek all the credit, you give Tua none of the credit. And it's just one of those things that keeps happening. And you see it all the time in the NFL because where a player came from and what the preconceived notions are. And Kyren Williams is a player who's been phenomenal and probably helped a lot of people win fantasy leagues this year. And we got a question here from JDS. Is Kyren Williams that good, or is he a product of the McVay's system who creates wide holes for the running game as good as anyone? And so it kind of goes back to that Shanahan run game and the wide zone and how good a lot of those run games are. Kyren Williams is performing a heck of a lot better than his immediate predecessors, right? So you got to give some credit to Kyren Williams for what he's doing right now, even though for some people he probably feels like he came out of nowhere.
Yeah, really interesting player because he was beloved at Notre Dame, huge school, like team captain, loves pass protection, good receiver, all the little things, came on the scene as a special teamer, big-time leader on a big-time program, and had a really good career there. So I pulled up his combine numbers. He was 5'9", 194 pounds, ended up being a late 5th-round pick because he ran a 4.65. You can't be small and slow in this league.
Yeah.
And he still is small and rather slow, but he's been a massive success story this year, but I'm listening to a fantasy podcast yesterday and people were talking about Williams saying, well, he's definitely a first-round pick in fantasy next year. And I don't agree with that. I do agree that if you drafted him this year, you probably made some money of some sorts, considering where you got him or if you picked him up. And I do want to give him credit. But if it was Todd Gurley in his prime, it's the exact same offense, I bet it'd be better. Terrell Davis-Portis conversation, Right.
And I think, and this goes back to the Tyreek Hill versus CeeDee Lamb thing too. One thing, production, what are they doing? And the other thing is, who's the better player? Who you betting on going forward? So, like, CeeDee Lamb had a phenomenal season this year. Brock Purdy had a phenomenal season this year. But would you rather have Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen than Brock Purdy? Yeah, maybe Brock Purdy had a better season this year, though. And both of those things can be true. And
exactly
with Kyren Williams, right? Would you rather have Christian McCaffrey or Kyren Williams? We'd rather have Christian McCaffrey, right? Would you rather have I don't know, name your running back that had a down year? Would you rather have
I was just sitting here thinking,
Kyren
like,
Williams?
What if we flopped Kyren Williams and Saquon Barkley? I would rather have Kyren Williams for the 21st pick in the 5th round as opposed to Barkley for the 3rd pick in the 1st round. But a healthy Barkley with the Rams compared to Kyren Williams with the Giants this season, I bet it would be better with Barkley in LA, know?
Yeah. And Barkley, even if he's injured and misses some games, whatever the replacement level player that backs him up, that full season versus Kyren Williams full season, you plug him into the same system. You'd probably rather have Barkley. Kyren Williams had the better season, and it's okay for both to be true. Yeah.
So this brings me to something I've been trying to avoid, is the Built Bar bet. Tua had a better season than Herbert, but Herbert's still better, folks. I'm sorry. I can't concede it.
And we'll see who's head coach coordinator is next year. Right. So it's a perfect example.
Exactly. Right.
Drafting quarterbacks, I'll take Herbert over Tua. Tua had the better season, and Tua's maybe better.
I wanted you to be the judge and jury on that. Because...
Yeah. So Dave, love the Built Bar bet. Appreciate you. I believe it's Dave, the Miami Dolphins fan, and Tua's phenomenal. Maybe we didn't give Tua enough credit. We got to give Tua credit for how good he's been, but I would still take some other quarterbacks over him. And the bet was about Justin Herbert. Awful season for Justin Herbert. I would still bet on Justin Herbert and take him on my team. And I would love to see a Tyreek and a Mike McDaniel with Justin Herbert and see what that ended up looking like.
Exactly.
So, again, both of those things are kind of true right now, which is a great.
I don't think the bet was who had a better season. Tua had a better season.
No. Yeah.
100%. Right. It's who is the better player. I think 32 GMs would agree with us and draft Herbert ahead of Tua.
So how about this one then? This goes right into the next conversation about coaching changes. And there's been some conversation about what coaches maybe the Chargers might be looking at. And Bill Belichick is one of those names. And so we got a question here about Bill Belichick. And Crime Dog says, do you guys see Bill Belichick returning to the Patriots next season? If so, what changes does the organization need to make to improve the talent, particularly on offense or on the field, off the field? What's going on there with the Patriots? I see Bill Belichick moving on. And I would love to see Bill Belichick in a situation like Chicago and see what Justin Fields looks like, a situation like the Chargers, and see what Justin Herbert looks like. So it'll be fascinating to see where Bill Belichick goes. I do think it is the end for Bill Belichick and the Patriots. But if he stays, how do they fix that? Because they've been I feel like they're spinning their wheels. What would one more offseason even change there?
I know. So this is exactly the question. I don't know if Belichick would go to Washington or Carolina, but I could see them saying, it's all yours. I mean, it's all yours. Just save us. We're drowning here.
If we're ranking jobs and you're Bill Belichick, Matt, and you get 3 offers, it's Chargers, Commanders, Panthers. It's not even a question, right?
Because of Herbert.
Right.
I mean, with all the cap issues and all that stuff, I mean, still at Herbert. Side note, I just want to throw this out there. I do think there's a really good chance that Harbaugh, after Michigan's game this week from now, ends up in either Chicago or LA with the Chargers. He just hired Don Nee, I think is his name, is a well-known coach, NFL coach, agent. Yeah.
He's Tom Brady's agent as well. And there's drawn connections between the Raiders, Tom Brady,
Raiders is the other one,
and Harbaugh. So that's another interesting one as well.
But I
mentioned there too.
I don't think Belichick will be the head coach next year. Now, I do want to give him credit. I think over this last month or 6 weeks, he's done some of his best work with an offense that can't even complete passes and doesn't have their best running back and has wide receivers that should be on the street. Like, they've been highly competitive based on defense and fundamentals and game management and Belichick stuff. So I think he's still coaching his butt off, to be honest with you. But I do think, and I don't have any inside information, and trust me, Mr. Kraft didn't consult me on this. I think Kraft is going to go to Belichick and say, we're officially rebuilding. We have a super high pick. I want this guy to be in charge of the personnel. And I think Bill will say, I'm beating feet. I'm out of here.
Yeah, that would be interesting if Bill Belichick's like, yeah, I don't want to move again. I want to stay. Let's figure out quarterback. Let's coaches don't give up power. You know what I mean? And Bill Belichick earned the right to make things however.
Earned all the right.
Even if he ends up giving up power of GM, he would rather do that somewhere else than where he's at. It's just kind of how that thing works. You would have to move on for that to happen.
The building just changes dramatically. If there's a new guy in the corner office that Bill has to go knock on his door and be like, thinking about picking this guy up. Is that okay with you? That's not how it works there. I mean, everyone goes to work the same day and they all answer to Bill. That doesn't change, And
even if he had a GM, he would hire the GM where he's got the final say. The GM finds him the pieces he wants, not the other way around.
And I don't know that Kraft says yes to that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want one of your lackeys. That's
how it already is. There's a GM, but Bill's in charge.
Right. I mean, everything goes through him, what color they paint the walls, what they have for lunch, how they travel, all that stuff.
The other thing is Bill's an East Coast guy, Giants, Patriots,
Brownies
for 5 minutes. Yeah. Browns. Bill Belichick in LA getting
that seems so weird. Right. Or Vegas.
Right.
Washington seems like get it back to the Hogs in Washington. That seems more logical.
I'd rather live on the wrong coast and have a great quarterback than live on the right coast and be whatever is going on there on offense and trying to figure it out with the offensive coordinators. They've tried everything. That's why I think Bill's going.
Bill would get soft on your coast. Too much sun.
What if he showed up to his first press conference with no socks, showing like the joggers with the ankles?
Flip flops. Yeah,
can't see that.
Right. You can't wear a hoodie in Vegas. I mean, it's too hot.
All right, we move along. Actually, a question about surprise coach firings as well, and a whole lot more. How about should teams stop fielding punts altogether? Next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The NFL regular season wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on all the NFL action with FanDuel. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose on that first $5 bet. So you got $150 extra to bet on NFL football, playoff games, college football, national championship, draft props, which are one of my favorite, and parlays. I'm all about the draft props and the parlays at FanDuel, not just NFL, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball around the corner, tons of ways to bet, and even coach firings. You can bet on that as well. More on that in a minute. The app is super easy to use. Love the website interface. Build your own parlays, live same-game parlays. You can find bets with the new Explore tab on FanDuel. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup and get $150 extra to play with. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right. What about surprise coach firings? I think it would still be a surprise just because the level of Bill Belichick, and you're talking about greatest coach of all time. And I don't think it would be a firing. I think it would be a mutual thing. And I think the Patriots would also get a draft pick from whatever team he goes to. So I think that's what the all-encompassing deal would look like. So it wouldn't necessarily be a firing. That would be a huge surprise. It was like, oh, Bill Belichick got fired the Monday after.
Black Monday, yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Everybody else, right. Agreed.
But with the question is, and I lost the question already here. It's
who would be the surprise coach firings, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, here we go. It's from James on Twitter. And, every year there's a surprise firing or two. Would it be like, the Bidwells, Teppers? Is it one of those sort of ownership groups? You've got a new ownership group in Washington. We kind of have seen them operate a professional franchise, not necessarily in the NFL, though. What could that look like? Would that even be a surprise? Are there any surprises on the horizon you can see as far as coaches, man?
Well, I'm reaching on purpose because that's the nature of the question. I mean, who would shock you? So the names I jotted down, they claim they're safe, the Jets and the Saints. But is that Michael Corleone kissing Fredo on the cheek saying, I know it was you? Could they still get the axe?
Right. It's like,
that would be surprising.
But you just blew it in week 18. We're not in the playoffs. Now you're not safe.
Yeah, I'm reconsidering. You're done. Tennessee would surprise me. I mean, I think that's Vrabel's a really good coach, and I don't think he'd be unemployed for long. So I'm going to call that a surprise. Could Pete Carroll just say, I'm old, I'm done.
Yeah.
This is fun.
Yeah.
You know, that would surprise me.
Wouldn't be a firing though.
Firing. It wouldn't be a firing. It wouldn't be a firing.
I've got one, Matt.
And I got one more. Go ahead.
What's yours then? Because
what if Tampa doesn't win the South?
Tampa?
I mean, his seat was hot. I think they outkicked their coverage this year, but we're doing surprises.
Yeah, that's a tough one because it wouldn't have been a surprise to begin the season if that ended that way. But if they make the playoffs, win the division, it would become more of a surprise because of how the season went. So that one's really interesting to me. Does that
if they squander these last couple games and don't get in, maybe like, I was planning on firing them all along. Let's get rid of them.
Certainly the seat much less warm than when the season started there.
I mean, you'd have to lose at Carolina, though. I mean,
I've got the biggest surprise one, and the fans of this team are calling for it after last week, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles and Nick Sirianni.
I almost wrote that one down.
It'd be a huge shocker, but people are angry right now. Philly, that's just the nature of Philly fans anyway, but people are shouting it from the rooftops. Fire Sirianni, doesn't know what's going on, no answers. Just watching the team play, watching the body language of all the guys on the field, it's kind of falling apart there at the end of this season, and they don't have much time to figure that thing out.
So Randy Mueller is a former GM, very successful one. Him and former friend of the podcast, Mike Sando, friend of mine, they do one podcast a week. And I heard Mueller saying this is something that GMs speak amongst themselves about more or less, that no matter how good things are, we're 3 games away from a mutiny. Like, I used that when the Steelers lost 3 in a row, including to the Patriots in Arizona. Like, no matter how good things are, you can be Super Bowl champ, but you lose your first 3 games and it's ugly. The whole building's going to blow up. You know, like 3 games in a row can be enough. And the Eagles are in the midst of that in a big way.
And we already saw that in Philadelphia. They won a Super Bowl, new coach, new quarterback, less than 2 seasons later.
100%. Good point. Yeah. I mean, I don't think that would happen, but that was the almost name I jotted down was the Eagles. Like, if they lose in round 1 to Tampa, you know, like what if they go to the AFC South team and lose?
One and done, and I think the seat got uncomfortably warm. It would be a surprise, but we're talking surprises here.
Yeah.
Coach Andrew referenced Coach Dan here. And
one more. Could Andy Reid be like, I'm done?
Any of the old coaches, I guess.
The old coaches could.
Yeah. They walked away, but firing, no.
Not fired, no. Carroll and Reid can't get fired, but they could maybe say, this is fun. I'm done.
Be a good succession there, too. Unfortunate for Eric Bieniemy because he left, because Spagnuolo, I think, deserves some consideration with the job he's done with that Chiefs defense. Would he walk into the job and be like, oh, man, Eric Bieniemy left to the wrong team a year early because he could have walked into the job if Andy Reid decides to go.
I can't say I was blown away with Bieniemy as the Commanders coordinator, though, too.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know that he enhanced his stock.
Coach Andrew references Coach Dan here. We got a double coach question. Rush 11, never field a punt, let the ball land where it lands, and you always get possession. What do you think? With the way that the return game has become, and this is kind of in reference to the college football playoff and some botched, punt returns. Since nobody's returning anything these days, are you better off just letting the ball land, trying to block it, and then never muffing a punt ever?
See, I thought this was really intriguing, and I've thought about it several times since then. And originally I was like, that's a good idea, and I still think it kind of is. First off, returning a punt is way harder than anyone thinks. You know, muffing a punt happens. I mean, it's just hard. It's raining in your eyes, and 3 guys are within 5 yards of you trying to take your throat out. You know what I mean? Like, and the pressure's on. And
of all the things, you could go out and try to make an NFL throw, and most people can't. I think even fewer people could catch an NFL punt. That is
so
hard.
This is funny because I can't help myself. Near the end of my Football Today podcast with my buddy Roflo, Robert Flores, he now works for MLB Network. He was a talking head for the Sports Center. We used to fight about this all the time. And he'd be like, Matt, I can catch an NFL punt. I'm like, you would die. Your pretty face would get hit with this football and it would blow out your teeth and your nose would be all bloody. So I'm going to give you a helmet for your own safety, but that also clouds your ability to catch this football. Maybe you're slightly more athletic than I think. And BP, I know you're more athletic than Roflo. You at least have some history of doing something sport related. Maybe you would catch 1 out of 10. NFL punter, given it all he got, maybe. but not in the elements in the stadium with it raining in your face, foggy, freezing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And players running at you, by the way.
Oh, by the way, and pressure and soft feet, like the footing's bad, and these guys put crazy spin on it, and they put this Australian kick in now, and now they have like a lot of clubs in their bag, these punters. They don't just drive it. But back to the 11 thing. If you could, I think you get very few penalties as a return team. It just lands where it lands. They down it. And I think there's some value to doing it 10 times a year, something like that. Probably you're going to get the team to call a timeout. Like, holy smokes, they're bringing 11. Like, I didn't plan on this timeout.
No holding penalty during the return that actually sets you back from where the ball would have landed anyway.
Right. Now, I bet after you put it on tape once or twice, opposing punters would be like, well, I no longer care about hang time. I can just get my 1-iron out, and this thing will roll and roll and roll. Like you might have like 70-yard punts if they know they don't have to hang time it. Just line drive it. You know what I mean?
You got to have a returner back. You got to rush 10 and at least have a guy back.
It's pretty gutsy.
Yeah, depending on the situation. Unless, they're punting from near the 50 or near midfield or something like that.
Last note on that. I'm shocked, though. As soon as I read this, I thought when the game's on the line and you're down 4 points or whatever, and teams are kicking deep in their own end, sell the farm to try to block a kick it through the end zone, get a safety, or you know what I mean? Get the ball back. Like in desperate times, potentially throwing a Hail Mary, or it's better than trying to catch an onside kick. Like those things don't ever convert. You might block a punt.
If you don't even think you're going to be able to get into range to score.
Striking distance.
Right.
Yeah, there's like hardly any time on the clock. You got no timeouts.
Field goal doesn't do it. Right.
Yeah.
You could also lose the most on where you would have fielded the punt versus where that thing could roll if a punter gets it out. But that has to not matter in that situation. Right.
Yeah. So there's some situations I would condone it for sure. And just once in a while.
And we're talking NFL. If we go back to college and
high school.
High school. Well,
the punters are so bad.
High school punters are bad and returners are good. So you can make up, you're probably returning a lot more in high school. So it's probably the NFL is where it's even the most beneficial because nobody has a good punt returner, it seems like, anymore. You just want a guy that can catch it. Well, if that's all he's doing anyway, then what are you actually gaining? And the coverage units are better. And if you have a shaky returner, especially, so you kind of know your own personnel, if you're not confident in your punter, don't put one back.
I can't stop thinking about high school right now. Like, I don't watch much high school football anymore, but I used to for a living. But I do watch the local team, and some of my son's friends are good players, etc. But every time I watch, I'm like, and it's good Western PA football. They're a good program. But the long snap comes back like this. And then some punter catches it and fiddles with it and then slowly kicks it out. If I brought 11, I think I'd block everyone.
It comes out flat, but then in high school, you put your best player back who's the fastest, and he can run around guys and score touchdowns. So I think you gain a lot of return.
But maybe you ask that guy to be your kick blocker.
That's true. Yes, put your best player somewhere. He'll make a difference. He's probably likely to block it as to return a touchdown.
All you got to do is get back there, and while this dude takes forever to punt it, you'll crush him.
All right. Thanks for all your questions out there. Apologies to the ones we did not get to. Lots of fantastic ones. And Matt and I back tomorrow. We're going to start making picks for week 18. Regular season finales, our 6-pack Thursday, and then we'll finish it up Friday. Talk to you then right here. Peacock and Williamson.